taal. Hoewel ik niet zeker weet dat deze om 8 uur wordt uitgezonden en het zal weer in het Engels zijn. Hi, welcome Vera. It is an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I think a lot of people are already aware of who you are, and today will be a special broadcast also because we have this issue a lot in the media. And then of course we are talking about the Jewish past, the Second World War, and the period leading up to the Second World War. But before we get into those comparisons, tell us, please, who is Vera?
Who's Vera? Well, I was a child when my family was deported. We were in Romania and we were deported to a concentration camp in Ukraine, where my father died. He died actually of typhus, which is an infectious disease that was rampant in all the ghettos and concentration camps. Understandably, since there was no hygiene and no food, starvation, and of course, no medicines. Adults don't give children much credit for what children absorb. And I was very observant. One of the things that people can't hide is the zeitgeist, of when all the adults are living in fear and terrified about something, children pick up on that, even though the adults try to pretend that the world is different when they speak to their child. So even though I was only 3.5 when, the world collapsed, but I had 3 years in the concentration camp. My father died before I was 5. And then I had an odyssey, some 10 months in which I was a child in transit without either mother or father. So I had to fend for myself. One of the strongest lessons that I learned was how to assess people. Because I was little. First of all, I'm little, but in the camp, I didn't grow very much. Again, starvation diets don't help growth for children. And so I was an only child, so I was not comfortable with my peers. I was afraid of being bullied, and I always looked for adults who I thought I could trust to take care of me. And I did. I was helped. I was helped by both Christian families and Jews. In Romania, you see, when I left the camp, I was sent back to Romania. The pretext was as if, it was by mistake that these orphan children were sent. That was not true. What happened there? There was some sort of financial deal. In other words, ransom was paid for some children. And this was in 1944, when the Holocaust was really getting into high gear. This was the final solution. And they had intended to eliminate everyone who was left in all concentration camps. So I was one of the bartered children. And as I say, I learned to assess people. And so now with all the masks, distancing and distrust of other people that little children are being exposed to, I feel it's really very unbearable, because they're being deprived, the little ones are being deprived of developing a sense of, based on people's expressions. You learn a lot. These are signs. This is more than language. And they're being robbed. They've been robbed not only of actual schooling, but life experience with human beings.
Absolutely. So we are, or a lot of people that lived through that period have a déjà vu, but we also see that there is this consensus, quote unquote, within the media and within the powers that be, that we are not allowed to compare.
I know. And that suddenly has brought out the fighter in me. Because I have a right to talk.
Exactly. And then if
I
you,
have a right.
I have some slides that I want to take you through. This was the first time I saw you talking in front of a rally and talking about medical freedom. Please tell us, how did you get involved in these freedom rallies?
Because others aren't allowed to touch the Holocaust. That's how I got involved with this current outspoken public speaking and sort of really doing a lot of interviews, because others get pilloried. And I feel my mission is to open up the chains that are surrounding the Holocaust as if it was irrelevant to history, when it's the most relevant event in human history to today is the Holocaust. Why? Until today, one feature distinguished the Holocaust from all other genocides, and that was the close involvement, partnership really, of the medical profession in genocide. Medicine was weaponized from a healing profession into a murderous apparatus of the state. And that is what is happening today. I want to warn people that if they do not resist, if they do not recognize, if they put blinders on them, because they'll be criticized, they will give up everything that people have fought for so many years, for so many decades. If we lose this war, and this is not a battle, it's a war of survival. This is an existential war for the human species. They are out to eliminate most of the global population. This isn't just about Jews. It isn't just about Africans. It isn't just about single ethnic groups. It's about the entire human population. And people really need to understand that, to recognize that today the unvaccinated are being treated as the Jews were in 1933, 34. They're being hounded. They're being vilified. Jews were accused of being spreaders of disease under the Nazis. And now the unvaccinated are being accused of spreading the virus. It's a lie. It was a lie then, and it's a lie now. And the only way to arm yourself with the assault, and it is an assault, it's a digital assault, is by recognizing those parallels and putting it out in the open so that more people can see, oh my God, this is what they're after. Yes.
So then I did some research, but you have been outspoken on this subject for a much longer time. So I guess this was also natural for you to speak out. Tell us something about, because you got a whole biography in Nature in 2008.
Yeah, I got involved with the psychiatric profession, particularly the increased use of psychotropic drugs. The drugs are being used essentially as restraints, chemical restraints. These drugs do not cure anything. These drugs do not help. At most, they make groggy. They really weaken you so that you can't, you don't have control then of your faculties. And the thing about it is that in psychiatry, the doctors do not have any respect for their patients. They're disqualified because they're crazy. In psychiatry, the government helps to enforce forced drugging. Forced drugging. Now we've got forced vaccination. Psychiatric drugs are a huge, huge, huge business. Now it's overtaken by vaccines.
And it's almost the same players. And what really triggered me was that part about the informed consent, that already here they were trying to get around it with waivers of informed consent. Can you tell us something about that?
Well, that's the point. As I said, psychiatrists disqualify their patients as full human beings. So therefore, they feel entitled to do and prescribe whatever they want without the consent of the patient. Now, there are all too many cases of patients being badly harmed. Some of these drugs, for example, cause diabetes. They cause all kinds of heart problems. They cause what is called tardive dyskinesia, which is involuntary muscle movement, which is very, aside from it being debilitating, it's also, it makes you into pariahs. Nobody wants to be near you. You've got all kinds of quirks in you. And to them, that doesn't matter as long as they swallow the pills.
Yeah, so it's more focused on not or trying to solve the problem for the outside instead of for the patient.
Correct. The patient doesn't count. And they do it en masse. And they also, what they've done is they increased their their client base to children. Children who misbehave, who may be disinterested in what the teacher is talking about. So now children are being drugged, and the government will come in and threaten to take the child away if the parent refuses to obey doctor's orders. The minute you have government involved in medicine, watch out. It's no longer medicine. It becomes a government
mechanism of control.
Mechanism, exactly, of control. And they've used it that way. And they also introduced, now another clever thing they've done, which was then copied in vaccines, and that is to use drug cocktails, multiple drugs at one point, swallowed at the same time. What does that mean? If every drug has side effects, every drug, and it used to be way back that every drug used to carry the skull and bones to warn people, this is poison, okay? And the point was that it was understood that medicines were poisons, but the doctors had the special knowledge and art to determine the right dose for the individual so that they would be not harmed and would be helped. They did away with the skull and bones, and some of the drugs actually, especially those that children are supposed to take, they make them look like jelly beans. So when you mix a bunch of drugs and there are bad side effects, like the ones that I talked about, which company do you blame? Each one will say, not my drug, it's his.
And we see the story repeating itself because last week I covered an article that was about the heterologous injections, the mixing and matching, and the destroying of the control groups, trying to inject everything and everybody with multiple brands. So we are back to the story that you just told us.
Absolutely. It follows the same pattern because this is a business model. This is not a medical model. Medicine has wound up being the prostitutes of the pharmaceutical industry. It's that bad. It's that bad. It happens in other areas as well. I mean, Eli Lilly once came out with a drug for heart attacks that was like $2,000 a shot, when it turned out that plain aspirin was doing the same thing.
Also, a very similar story to IVM today.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, these things are not new. It's just that now it was launched on a much, much bigger scale. Now they have the entire global population in their radar, you know. It used to be the separate groups. They went one after the other. AIDS was a huge business. Also, all multiple drugs, all mixed up. The other aspect, as far as you see, we talk about informed consent. This comes out of Nuremberg, and Nuremberg comes after the Nazi atrocities became public in court of law. And so the Nuremberg Code was formulated so that medical atrocities, which means medicine that you do not give informed, voluntary consent to, has no place in a civilized society. And they wanted to make sure that atrocities such as the Nazis doctors committed would never happen again. We are now at the gateway of it happening right now.
Exactly. And that is when you co-signed the letter that we delivered for you at the EMA. Of course, we got a lot of response worldwide, I would say. So that was very, very encouraging. But then we looked at the reply after a few weeks, and I want to point out this first sentence. As a preliminary remark, the EMA finds the comparisons you make both inaccurate and inappropriate, as if you are not allowed to speak about your past and about your déjà vu feeling.
Well, this is this disqualifies us as survivors. That's the first thing. How dare they? Who has the moral right to disqualify people's experience? They're doing it also now with those people who are harmed by the COVID injections. They're not allowed to speak. They're disqualified too. What kind of a society then are we going to? Well, I know what kind we're going to.
Yeah.
I want to stress, this is from my research, obviously, not from my direct experience, but at the time, during the 30s mostly, and even quite late, nobody believed that Hitler meant what he said he would do. And they were wrong. So we are told, oh, no, no, this is for our own good. Yes. No. None of the restrictions, none that have been taken since March 2020 have been for our good or in any way justified by public health or medicine. None of it. They did things in order to get us conditioned, psychologically conditioned, to trust no one except those that are giving us the order, the experts, the government ordained experts. It's something like a religious sect, really. That's the way this is.
It's very literal, actually, a religious sect. It is called the One Health Alliance or the One Health Platform, and it has their own symbol, so it is a sect. So what I find startling, not only the disrespect towards the Holocaust survivors, but also the blatant lies that once a regulatory authority has granted the marketing authorization for a medicine, it can no longer be considered investigational. There is no marketing authorization. There is a conditional marketing authorization. So this is playing with words.
Well, they do this.
Yeah.
Look, it's very, actually, it's very clear, the FDA did not license this drug, and everyone followed whatever the FDA does. So FDA, I mean, the authorization, the emergency use authorization is only allowed if there is a real pandemic. A pandemic, the definition of a pandemic until the World Health Organization changed it all of a sudden, was the number of deaths. It was defined by the number of deaths. It never reached, COVID-19 never reached that platform. So they changed it, and the FDA used the WHO as the justification. However, there were a few other problems which the FDA didn't want to know about, didn't want to see. And that is, by US law, you cannot market under authorization emergency unless there is nothing else available that could be used. And we had plenty of drugs that are fully FDA licensed, that have a safety record for decades, that doctors have used for all kinds of diseases for decades. And this is not unusual. A lot of drugs can be used for more than what they are initially approved for. That's part of medicine, trial and error, and finding all sorts of new uses, reuses. Doctors have been and continue to be forbidden to use curative medicines. Why? Why is government interfering with the professional judgment of medical doctors?
That is
that's something, by the way, that's something that the Nazis didn't do. That is something that happened only now. Have we reduced doctors into yes-sayers, into like stenographers?
It seems to be the case. So after that reply of the email, we filed charges in the name of a few organizations, and you were one of the co-signers as well of this letter. Up until this day, we have not had any confirmation of the ICC, which is peculiar, to say the least. But of course, the ICC is part of the UN, like the WHO. So I'm not sure that we will ever get a reply of them.
Well, what this shows, this whole thing, what it shows really is that we do not have a legal body that has any sort of moral standing whatsoever. We have dictates and we have consensus, and we do not have morality. And without morality, we don't have a civilized society.
Yes, and this, I think, is the most important part. And these letters are on our website if you want to read it, also the Dutch translation. But history will not look upon you kindly if you fail to do your duty. Know that your eyes and those of the peoples of the world are upon you. The responsibility lies with you. You know what is happening. You have the evidence, and now you must act. And this was the letter that was sent to the EMA and to the ICC. I'm afraid that it will be in vain for now, but with every dictatorship, we see a rise and a fall, which will inevitably fall. So now in Holland, especially this part is really becoming mainstream, as some members of parliament have told this, almost this exact phrase, to other members of parliament, which are proponents of the medical experiment and the forced vaccination. Also, some rabbi in Holland are speaking out and making the same comparison. People, beware what is happening now. We have seen before. But then what we see is that these people that are brave enough, like yourself, to speak out, they get a lot of pushback and backlash, not only from the media, but also from politics and from the own Jewish communities, so they say, or the Jewish organizations.
Okay. I have some, like everything else, as I indicated way back, that as a child, I learned how to assess individuals. One of the things that I do not look on as really the important is groups, and especially groups that essentially are vested interest groups. Institutions, whatever, it doesn't have to be government, nonprofit, they wind up being beholden to their payers. And during the last 20 years or so, maybe more, almost all institutions and organizations and nonprofits have been bankrolled by those who then dictate what they go along with, that they support the policies that these payers, like Bill Gates, he's been bankrolling, for example, media for decades. He started to fund journalist schools way back. He was the only one at that time. Now, what happens? Of course, it was brilliant because they then are trained. By the time they get to CNN, they already know what they're supposed to do. That's it. So that's why you have the entire media and the social media. They're all singing from the same script. You can click the channels one after the other. It's the same thing. The same script is coming out.
And this is also reminiscent of Goebbels, for instance.
Absolutely. That's the Goebbels thing, that you have one storyline, one narrative, and it's dictated by the state. It's supported by everybody else. And you keep on repeating. Repeat, repeat, repeat. And of course, that's what people have gotten used to. When they were locked down, for sure, all they did was glued to the television, news, news, news. And what they hear in the news all the time, oh, death, death, death. And it was all made up. It was all made up. When we heard about hospitals being overrun, that was nonsense. You know, at the beginning there, when there were many COVID cases, but at that time it was President Trump. Whatever you think of Trump doesn't matter, but he did give them a big battleship to be a hospital, to add a hospital, and the Javits Center, which is a big commercial trade shows there, was turned into a hospital, and they never used them.
Same
So
story.
that's how crowded they
Same
were.
story
But,
all over the world.
but the propaganda, they showed as if they had to do tents in Central Park. Please. You see, at the time, none of us knew, after all, what COVID was. But there were a few people in New York who went with a camera to some of the hospitals, and they photographed empty, 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 empty. There were a few hospitals that were overrun and all that, but that were purposely, everybody was sent to them. And the people died because of bad treatment, not because of the virus. They weren't getting treatment for the virus. They were being told to stay home until they really got bad symptoms and then to come to the hospital. And then they put them on ventilators and killed them. That was mass murder.
Yes.
There is another thing, and I do want to say this. I don't want to forget this because this is a direct parallel. The first victims of the Holocaust were not Jews. They were German infants and children under the age of 3. They were disabled in some way. Doctors selected each child, decided whether they would be killed, medically murdered, or whether they do an experiment, or they would be okay, sent back home. Of course, the parents were lied to. The children were forced out of their parents. They were told that the children would get special treatment to improve their condition. After they were murdered, parents would be given false death certificates signed by medical doctors that the child died of natural causes. End of story. The next group were the mentally ill, and then the nursing home residents. They did this. The justification was public health. First, they wanted to cleanse the genetic pool. The Aryans must be superior. And to get rid of economic burden. And they had lots and lots of propaganda about this heavy burden of all these unfit, worthless eaters, is what the Nazis called them. In March 2020, we had a replay of T4. T4 was the euphemism, the code for this medical murder project. In March 2020, the wealthiest countries in the world, Western Europe, United States, Canada, Australia, everyone issued medical murder orders, essentially. They condemned the elderly in nursing homes to death. They ordered hospitals not to treat them, to send them to nursing homes, where they were totally ill-equipped, neither to treat anyone who was infected, nor to stop the spread of the infection. As a result, the majority of deaths from COVID were the elderly. But this was pre-planned, because how come every one of the Western European countries followed exactly the same?
Yeah, and for the people who are not aware of this story, look up Governor Cuomo of New York. He has been exposed to send sick elderly people to these nursing homes to infect other people. This is not a made-up story. It is in the mainstream media.
In fact, he did it partly at the behest of New York State insurance companies who were his main contributors to his elections. Before he issued the murder order, he gave complete immunity to both hospitals and nursing homes. And he said, he predicted this virus in nursing homes will be like fire through dry grass. Before he issued the murderous order, he predicted it would be like fire through dry grass. So yes, this is premeditated murder. He, during about a year, he was giving daily briefings, and for that he got an Emmy Award from the prestigious media. And he penned a book, which a lot of his staff helped him write during all this period, for which he got $5 million. So he walked away. I mean, he was forced finally, and he was forced out of office, not for his mass murder. He was forced out of his office for groping some of his women co-workers.
Yeah, that is also very typical. We see Benjamin Netanyahu forced out, Berkelian in Australia, Kurz in Austria. We see all these corruption scandals about minor stuff.
Yeah,
they walk away. They did their dues,
yes.
And they're not prosecuted yet. But I'm saying yet because I want to take you to this one, and this gives me a little bit of hope. Can you please explain to the viewers what we're looking at?
Well, we're looking at a decision of a rabbinic court in New York, which 3 rabbis signed it. There were quite a few other rabbis present, and the testimonies that they got, it's 8-hour video
of medical professionals,
of the top world-renowned medical professionals. Yes. And the inventor of the mRNA, Dr. Malone, Robert Malone, he actually flew in and sat down with the rabbis at the table and told them he will be there as long as they want him to talk, and he will take all questions, whatever. And they did. They had a lot of questions. A lot of questions came from all the rabbis. And after they heard all the different testimonies, and left them also with a huge bibliography, some 1,200 scientific articles for them to look at, they came out with their verdict. And it begins with children. You may not use these injections on the children. You may not on adolescents. You may not on young men and women. You may not on pregnant women. It goes down the line. And then the elderly said, well, more information is needed, but for the sake of caution, do not vaccinate, which means Jews are forbidden to be vaccinated with this COVID injection.
What legal ramification does this have? Is this only a symbolic gesture? And I believe this is the only halachic court outside of Israel.
Well, in Israel, there was one too, where Dr. Zelenko talked to them. And I don't know the exact decision, but I mean, it's probably similar. There is also, there are 150 rabbis who signed a petition also against it. That's posted on the website. So what does it say? Well, look, religion has different standing in different countries, I know. In the United States, religion has the strongest legal standing. Actually, you know, in the United States is very serious, and many of the cases that have been won are about religious exemptions. This provides absolute document for religious exemption. A Jew doesn't want to be vaccinated, can point to, can't do it.
And it's not only for Jews, because these testimonies were scientific and they came to a conclusion also based on the scientific evidence.
Yes, but these rabbis feel they only have authority, you know, over Jewish people. But this is just it, right? Nothing to do with medicine or science or, you know, anything that's that is not religious is meant only for, you know, one religion or whatever. That's nonsense. It's just which ones are willing to consider, deliberate, and decide. Now, I want to, you said something, and okay, you're getting to that, which is similar really, about those Jewish institutions, groups, whatever, right? Yeah. Who are the guardians of the holy Holocaust. Well, I'm there to challenge that, because it's like it's a reaction that has been sort of trained, you know, as if they own it.
Well, that I see a lot, the ownership of pushing people out. No, we decide who can compare the Holocaust to what, and it has always baffled me. But now specifically, because we have some Jewish people in our organization, there are people like you speaking out as if you are not allowed to speak about your own past, your own experiences.
Well, this is why I'm taking such a strong public stand, and really in very many venues, very many interviews, because I believe that the Holocaust has a very important relevance to today. And if you put it aside, first of all, as if it's just Jews. No, it wasn't only Jews. There were many millions who were killed. Jews were the primary target, but that was the beginning. Hitler had bigger plans. He just didn't live long enough to realize them. Today, we have Klaus Schwab with his plan of the Great Reset, and that's meant for all of us. That's meant for the whole globe. This time, they got cleverer. They didn't pick on one group. They didn't go after the Africans or the Jews or the Catholics or whatever. No, they decided the entire human race is their playground. And they decide who shall live and who shall die. And by the way, the plan for those who shall live is as slaves, as digitally controlled slaves. Now, I'm appalled at Jewish institutions, like in New York, that require the IBM green passport. And, you know, in the UK, there's, I forgot the name of it, but that's the Kant family. And these are the relatives of Joseph Goebbels, enormously wealthy, and they, and this, so the connection between old Nazi families and the current ruling elite is one uninterrupted thread. And for those who don't know about IBM and the Holocaust, they should read a book by Edwin Black, IBM and the Holocaust. The Holocaust would not have been accomplished to the degree that it was. 6 million Jews would not have been slaughtered without IBM. Maybe 1 million.
Yeah, they made the punching cards, so everything could be like a machine. Everything was kept on record.
The records were there, the tracking, okay? And they also controlled the train schedules to ensure that one train came, the other one left. Everything went fast, fast, fast. And now we have warp speed. Vaccines, fast, 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 fast. Anytime that happens, something should go off in your mind and say, danger, danger. So, and IBM continues to be involved in tracking and surveillance. They work hand in glove with the CIA, with the military intelligence. That's their, and the same thing with the cons. And all of them. Look, Silicon Valley is now the main facilitators of the digital Holocaust, which is what is planned. They already have the technology to put chips, tattoos. Okay, Auschwitz, they had tattoos. Bill Gates already developed microchip tattoo. The current surveillance is far, far more sophisticated, far stronger, because now they can survey 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You cannot have a dream without their knowing what you're dreaming about. It's that intrusive. That's
Absolutely.
to make sure that you're obedient.
Yeah.
And everything, your bank account, your checking account, your whatever, it's all controllable through digital surveillance.
I want to go a bit further, and this is hard to read for a lot of people, I think. This is an email you got because you were speaking out. And I'm showing this because I think it is important to show the ugliness of the other side trying to suppress the story and really hitting below the belt.
Well, no, what it shows is the Nazi ethos has not been buried.
Mm-hmm.
And the only difference is that those who are being accused now of being Nazis are the ones who are speaking out in order to prevent another Nazi regime.
And that is also the double speak. We constantly see that the people who are raising the alarm bells are called Nazis, but they are actually speaking out against the atrocities.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, you conflate the message that way.
Yeah. So then this one, to me, is an admittance of guilt. So we have a super fast approval, which is not an approval, but a temporary conditional marketing license.
Yes.
In just 10 months, but they need 55 years to sort out.
To hide the data, to hide what they're hiding. Look, I mean, I don't understand. People who have more than a 4th grade should be able to understand that but do follow, it isn't even Pfizer or Moderna who's asking, it's the FDA who's asking for this silence. What does that say?
They're covering their own crime.
And they are in partnership. You see, you cannot separate. They have all financial and criminal complicity together. The evidence that they want to hide is what the companies want to hide. And they did get the evidence among whatever documents were submitted. And now they want only the public, we who are being bombarded to get this into our bodies, we're the only ones who are kept ignorant. And they want to do it for 2 generations.
Which is kind of amazing because earlier this week or 2 weeks ago, we had this publication, I think the 2nd of November in the British Medical Journal, that fraud was committed during the clinical trials. And this was the only one we know of yet.
Mhm.
But that means that if we do this, we cover it up, we cannot find out if there's more fraud. So this is amazing. And to me, it's really an admittance of guilt. And it also shows that the legal system is broken, that they are colluding with this to cover it up.
Well, we don't know yet whether the judge dares do this. But this is something, everything about this assault on humanity goes further than any other preceding nefarious regime ever tried. I mean, it really is total. They want essentially to have a complete blank slate. Nothing showing.
Yep.
That's what the Great Reset is. Yes. You bury the entire past civilization, everything. People need to understand really how far this band, and they are conspirators. Now let's be serious. The word has been besmirched as if it doesn't exist, as if such things don't exist. Oh, yes, they do. This is a conspiracy, and it's a conspiracy of an elite, the wealthiest ever elite, for whom power is there's no end to how much power they want. They want to be God. They want to replace God. And I mean God, whatever, however you look at it, because it includes nature. They want to improve nature. Nature is no good. That's why we need genetically modified foods, and now they want to do genetically modified people to be obedient beasts, robots.
Cattle. So I have one or two more slides. This came out today, and this article of RT is about the legal system, and it took 20 years to overturn it, and then another 20 more years to clean it up, to get the Nazi ideology out of the German legal system. And I'm showing this because this is where these people facilitate. The courts is where maybe the biggest problem is. And once we overturn the regime, I think there's a lot of work to be done to clean up the system and to build it new.
There was a heroic Jewish lawyer, Fritz Bauer, in Germany, who tried for years to get some of the legal people, the judges, on trial, and Nuremberg's type of trial. In a few he did, and then eventually he was found dead in the bathtub. There are lots of deaths that occur with various people involved in these, in the attempt to find the criminals, to make them accountable. And many have been, mysterious deaths. We also have some mysterious deaths of heads of state who did not go along with the vaccine orders.
Asia and Tanzania are probably the most famous ones, but I think
there are others. There are about 4 or 5. Yeah. And that again provides a hint as to how come all heads of state fell in line, just like that. My suspicion, this is not, I don't have yet, maybe it's part of that cash that's for 76 years they don't want to divulge, but I see it as it's a carrot stick kind of thing. It's both bribery, and this kind of bribery is substantial bribery. We're not talking about 1 million or 2. We're talking about a few 100 million for each one. And some of them, I suspect, aren't getting all their money until per head. That's why they're so anxious to get every one of us. They probably got, the beginning.
It's very
A lot of
clear
contracts are done that way, right?
yeah, it's very
Upon
clear
delivery.
they have to get a target at a certain
Yes,
yes.
right. And the other is to threaten. And those mysterious deaths help to convince. Otherwise, you cannot really explain how it was that everyone told their people to lock down, everyone, masks, even though they at first admitted masks won't do anything. Of course not. Oh, yeah. But they do a lot. They psychologically, it's a weapon. I regard the masks as the yellow star, because masks have a tradition that they are demeaning. They're disrespectful of your humanity. They say you're not a full free human being.
And you have to be obedient and you have to shut up.
Yeah.
And you have to be scared of the other, and you're not allowed to make contact. And all those psychological parts are added.
They're deadly. They're very effective. Look, I mean, the mind control experiments that were done at the behest of the CIA, and they were done at many, many, many institutions, many hospitals in the United States. They wound up leading to Abu Ghraib, torture. That all started in Dachau. And the United States brought over more than 1,600 scientists, Nazi scientists, Operation Paperclip. And they trained American doctors and psychologists how to do this stuff. So they've been training for a very long time. And now they're doing it, okay, and it used to be, it's true for the enemies, right? For terrorists, for this, that. But now it's the little children right here, your own. The story, it shows how insidious you allow this to be done at all. Gain of function. What's gain of function? Biological warfare experiments. It's illegal. It's illegal internationally. It's illegal by United States law, and I'm sure it's illegal by Netherlands law too. I mean, everybody has something about you're not supposed to be using biological weapons.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned it, because the city where I am, Rotterdam, is one of the cities that was involved. Yeah, you have Chapel Hill, North Carolina, Rotterdam, and Wuhan. Those are the three main institutes in this corona pandemic hoax.
There you go. I mean, that's just it. You see, what I also want to bring across to people that they need to understand, although I certainly read and listen to experts. To me, an expert is somebody who is not involved in any way financially, has nothing to gain. And the only experts who have nothing to gain are the ones who are criticizing, because they are telling the truth. They don't have money to lose if they tell the truth. Their jobs, yes, and they're getting pilloried. But the point is, they're not working for pharma and they're not working for the government. Those two, you can't tell the truth, because you definitely get fired. I mean, so while we listen to them, nevertheless, each one of us was born with the right to free will. That's a God-given right. Freedom to make your own judgment. And when people give that up, they're really giving up the most important part of their humanity. That's the difference between the animal who can be shepherded around and a free human being. And I know that many Christians criticize me for what I'm going to say, but I say it because it's the truth. During this time, during this COVID thing, I discovered that I have a heroine. Not a hero, but a heroine. And that heroine is Eve, the biblical Eve. She disobeyed God in order to have knowledge. And I think that's a pretty good heroine to have. But as I say, I get criticized, and I've explained, my reasoning and all that. But I think people should think about it,
I
because
think it's very similar
really,
to,
God, even though in most of the Bible it's you must obey, obey, obey. No, but there are key stories where you're supposed to not obey.
yes.
Eve is a
My
major.
favorite quote is from Buddha, and he says, "Doubt everything, find your own light." And I think that is really important to be an autonomous, responsible person, to
Yep.
follow your own intuition and to look at facts and opinions and the outside world, but always take your own moral compass into account.
Yeah.
The
And
moment
also your instinct, your human. I mean, one of the things that makes human beings different from others is we're unpredictable. And this is what they're trying to eradicate from existence. They can control groups, they can control heads of state, but they can't control every one of us. And believe me, they have spent a lot of time, a lot of thought how to get at us, and they can't. One of the examples is there were what in Israel they call righteous Gentiles. Okay, it's a special category of people who essentially maintained their humanity. They remained, and many of them risked their lives to help Jews, to hide Jews. And so many scientists, psychologists, anthropologists have tried to find out what unifies these people. What is the, they can't. Nothing. Has nothing to do with education, has nothing to do with religious, nothing. It's just they. And some of them have sort of just said, I had to. What do you mean you had to? Everybody else didn't have to, but you had to. That's the beauty of human beings. That's where the, a kind of a God comes into play, because God, yeah, like the expert, the ruler, but no, we are supposed to use our own barometer, our own moral indicator, and whatever. And sure, we will make mistakes. If you live long enough, you make plenty of mistakes. But you'll be responsible for your own mistake, and you'll learn from them. Whenever you defer to authority to make decisions for your life, when it's wrong, when it harms you, when your child loses their life because of the advice, they're not accountable at all. They're never accountable for the mistakes that they make. Here you have Anthony Fauci. He's never made a right decision, ever. It's all about how to kill people. Gain of function, just think of the euphemism, of course. Sounds very gain of function. What could be wrong? What could go wrong? It's essentially to make whatever pathogen or virus or whatever that you could lay your hands on more lethal and more transmittable. Yes. I mean, what could be worse?
Well, they are trying to infect us with fear, basically. But what I see actually gives me a lot of hope. I see people of all denominations coming together and trying to support each other and effectively resist, cooperating all around the world. I have never, ever in my life had so many meetings with people that I agree with and that I respect and that I have wonderful conversations with. So I am quite optimistic for the future in the mid-long term, but I think it will first become a hot and dark winter.
Well, I think that there are some interesting signs. One of them is both in the United States and now in Austria, that police and military refuse. Now, I understand that one of the tactics that they use is to get outsiders to be the police and all that. I don't know how long that, people will have to understand, we are the many. We are the many. They are only a small band, and they only have power if we give up our own. If we don't give up our power and say, no, no matter what, okay, go ahead in front of everyone, force, go ahead. How will that? People need to understand that you sometimes have to risk your life because it isn't worth living. I would not go back to living those 3 years.
Absolutely.
That's not living. And it'll be up to everyone now. And I also want to stress that the Holocaust survivors were rescued. There were military rescuers. Okay, Soviet Union, United States, and the United Kingdom. They rescued the rest of Europe and survived. This time there'll be no survivors, nothing, no rescuers. No rescuers. We are our own rescuers and our families' rescuers. And if people, I really don't have very much patience with the parents who are delivering their children to essentially the Moloch. That was in pre-biblical times, that was the one they would give them. That's what they're doing because they're shielding themselves with willful ignorance. Willful ignorance by an adult is a sin. I don't think there's anything worse than to deliver your children to what you don't know even what. I mean, really, at best, you don't know. You haven't informed yourself. You're just to luck. I mean, Russian roulette with your child's life? What have you come to? This is how they win. If you give up your right as a human being, that's when they win.
And that is why we always need to speak out and try to inspire and activate other people to do the same. Because you're absolutely right. The many will always win. Truth will always win, with one caveat that we need to stand up and we need to.
Yeah, but we want less casualties. This is a huge. The stakes are just tremendous. They've never been bigger, and and they don't need crematorium. They now can do it click from remote.
Well, let's end on a positive note. I want to thank you a lot for the interview. Hopefully we will meet again and hopefully also physically one day, if it's possible again. Please keep speaking out and keep giving your opinion, especially about the Holocaust and the comparison with the period before that, because it is so important that we take the lesson from that period. If there ever was a time, I think this time is it.
I do. I agree. This is why I'm doing this. I mean, but I'll tell you, most people my age, are bored. They're lonely, and that's really. I don't have enough hours in the day. I'm just so for that. It's stimulating, and I meet a lot of young people, and I do hope that we end this sooner rather than later. I would really, I don't want to see millions of children dead.
Thank you very much.
There will be thousands because they are rushing them. Really, it's like a conveyor belt.
Absolutely.
They need to start thinking what happens in a slaughterhouse, you send them and then the conveyor, that's how they have to have nightmares. Maybe then it'll wake them up that no, you do not deliver your children.
That's a strong message.
Well, look, at that time, many parents let their children go to save them. And don't think that that was easy or that the children ever healed. No, I've talked to enough, and so I know. That was not just, and they lived happily ever after. No, that there are scars that are forever. And I really hate to think, the German third generation, when they asked their grandparents, where were you? What did you do? How will people now sending their children, how will they feel if there are grandchildren? How will they answer? They have to think of really consequences, not just immediate, I need the green pass so I can go to the bar, I can go to the this and that. They're more important things.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for it.
Okay, thank you.